I don't want to see a man in a women's restroom. That's not a thing.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace, I hope that one day I do find you in that women's bathroom and I grab your ratty looking hair.
The trans bathroom wars have come to Congress, and things are getting rather unhinged rather quickly. I'm Brad Polumbo, and we're going to break down this story and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where I take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, across our politics, and across the media, all from an independent perspective. So up first, we've got to talk about the controversy that's breaking the internet right now in Congress, where the bathroom wars over trans issues have raged up again because Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who used to style herself as a pro-LGBT social moderate, is leading the charge to enact a bathroom bill in Congress. She just introduced a resolution that would restrict all bathrooms and gender-based facilities in the Capitol to be used only by people of their biological sex, restricting trans women from accessing women's bathrooms in the Capitol, which they've done for many years. Mace is explicitly doing this in response to the election of an incoming congressperson, Sarah McBride, who is a transgender woman, meaning that McBride is born biologically male. But this resolution will also impact staffers and employees there have been many Democratic staffers who are trans who have been using the facilities of their preferred gender for many years. That's about to change because Speaker Mike Johnson has indicated that he will be implementing this policy from Nancy Mace into the rules for the House. Before I get to my take, which might surprise some of you guys, but I just want you to hear me out. First, here's Congresswoman Nancy Mace on why she thinks this policy is necessary.
I'm not going to allow men to erase women or women's rights. And I'm going to be standing up here. I will file this again next congressional session. Sarah McBride doesn't get a say. This is about women. This is about girls. This is about our rights and being protected in our private spaces. I don't want to see a man in a women's restroom. That's not a thing. And it's not going to be a thing up here. It's not going to be a thing anywhere across the country either.
And unfortunately, if not particularly surprisingly, Mace has been getting unhinged threats from trans activists online over her proposal, like this one lovely individual.
This video goes out to Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, I hope that one day I do find you in that women's bathroom and I grab your ratty looking hair and drag your face down to the floor while I repeatedly bash it in until the blood's everywhere.
It should go without saying that no matter what your views are on this issue, that kind of rhetoric and threat is totally disgusting and unacceptable, and people like that should be investigated by the FBI. Now, how is Congressperson Sarah McBride responding to this controversy? Well, here's the tweet thread that McBride put out. Everyday Americans go to work with people who have life journeys different than their own and engage with them respectfully. I hope members of Congress can muster that same kindness. McBride continues, this is a blatant attempt from far right-wing extremists to distract from the fact that they have no real solutions to what Americans are facing. We should be focusing on bringing down the cost of housing, healthcare, and childcare, not manufacturing culture wars. Honestly, I was expecting much more of a woe is me victim script in response to this, so kudos to McBride on that front of at least staying somewhat constructive and not playing the victim all that much. Now let me give you my take on this issue, which is kind of nuanced, and I just want you guys to hear me out. If you disagree with me, that's always okay here. But I actually think that this policy change is kind of a solution in search of a problem. Trans women who work in the Capitol have been using women's public bathrooms for many years, and there haven't been any incidents. Even zooming out and looking nationwide, incidents of harassment or violence in public restrooms are incredibly statistically rare. And while you'll often hear the need for these policies justified in the name of safety, extensive empirical research into these policies has found that when trans people are allowed to use the bathroom that aligns with their gender identity, there is, empirically speaking, no uptick in crimes in bathrooms. I've never understood the safety argument behind these policies, because if a horrible person, trans or not, is planning on going into a bathroom to assault or molest or harass a woman, they're already not restrained by laws or policies because they're breaking tons of them in the process. To me, the bathroom policy preventing assault is kind of like believing that the sign that says gun-free zone is going to stop the mass shooter, something that Republicans would never really go along wrong with. Now, my point here doesn't necessarily make the argument for allowing trans people to use the bathroom, but it undercuts the safety argument as to why they must absolutely be prohibited from doing so. Because to me, it's not going to make any difference on actual matters of crime and public safety. And that's empirically supported as well. But one thing that these policies would do, and part of why I don't support them, is have pretty bizarre and dysfunctional results. Because as much as some conservatives sometimes don't like to admit this, there are a fair number of trans people who almost entirely pass as the opposite gender. I'm going to put some images on screen of prominent public figures who are trans men and are muscular, have beards, and appear as men. You really would not know the difference. Well, under Nancy Mace's policies, or generally speaking, the kind of bathroom bills that Republicans have sometimes advocated for, these people would be forced to use the women's bathroom. I often hear people say, well, my daughter will be uncomfortable if a man is in the restroom, referring to a trans woman. And I understand that. And maybe they will be, maybe they won't notice. I don't know. But I also think they'll be really uncomfortable with these guys in the bathroom. Now, I do acknowledge a fair degree of nuance to this conversation. I think things like locker rooms where there's nudity are a different story than stall-based bathrooms where the most you'd really be doing is washing your hands next to somebody of the opposite sex. Frankly, a lot of foreign countries have unisex public bathrooms, and it's not that big a deal or the end of the world. Almost everywhere in Scandinavia does that, for example. Locker rooms and changing spaces are definitely different, and I do believe that you should have to, at the very least, have had bottom surgery or not expose yourself whatsoever to go into a woman's space like that, even if you are a trans woman. And maybe they need to actually have a third space for locker rooms and changing rooms. I'm open to that. I think this has nuance, but I don't think the bathroom obsession and focus makes any sense at all. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I just had a very spirited debate with Allie Beth Stuckey over at The Blaze on this very issue. But if I'm wrong, you have to explain why by addressing my arguments or refuting my points. Unfortunately, some right-wing types on Twitter the last couple days have basically just said, shut up, you're a man. You don't get to speak on this, or you don't understand because you're a guy. And my response to that is, hold up. I thought we were against identity politics because to me, they sound like woke feminists. No uterus, no opinion. Sound familiar? I mean, that's essentially the same argument. In reality, invoking someone's identity never makes them more or less correct, never makes their points more or less logically sound. So just saying you're a dude, shut up, isn't an argument and isn't a rebuttal. Maybe I am wrong, but you're going to have to actually explain why, not just point to my gender. But what do you guys think of this issue? I honestly do want to hear from you. I know a lot of my followers and viewers and listeners might have different views, and I respect your opinion. And if you disagree with me, let me know why in the comments. Do hit that like button if you did enjoy the conversation and found it interesting. That's what I want this show to be, an interesting space where we can have dialogue so we can discuss ideas, and we don't always have to agree. And remember, I do pick a few comments to respond to in every episode, so definitely comment with your thoughts. And if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. But you do have to keep it brief, a paragraph or so. Can't send me a 10-paragraph essay. I won't be able to read it all. And now we got to check in on the media, because over at Piers Morgan Uncensored, one of my favorite shows on YouTube, things are getting kind of insane. Piers just hosted a guy named Ernest Owens, who's the author of a book called The Case for Cancel Culture, which kind of tells you what sort of perspective you'll be getting from this guy. And Piers, who I like a lot, absolutely destroyed him when Ernest went on an incoherent woke rant. Take a listen.
The Harris campaign. I think that there was an issue that was racial. I think it was gender, but I also think class played a major role in it.
Oh, there wasn't, honestly, Ernest. Yeah. I could take this claptrap before the election, but the idea that Kamala Harris lost because of her skin color or her gender or any of the rest of it is total bullshit. She lost because she was a terrible candidate who had no real policies, and her only playbook was to go right back to Hillary Clinton, who also lost, and say, here are my famous mates, and by the way, Trump's a Nazi and the new Hitler. That's all she had.
Another woman. You notice the pattern you just mentioned, that Trump loses to men he loses to men, but he beats women. So no pun intended.
I'm
But
sorry,
he-
Ernest.
he
You
typically
sound
do
desperate.
that.
How does Piers being British and not being able to vote in the election make him more or less correct? Like, that's such a dumb argument. The woke people are not sending their best. I can't believe that Ernest looked this audience in the face and earnestly tried to blame, see what I did there? Racism and sexism on Kamala's loss. Yeah, racism. You know how many of these same people voted for Barack Obama who voted for Trump this time or in past elections? A lot. You know how many of the people that switched to Trump this time are minorities themselves? It's not about racism. Give me a break. Or is it about sexism? In fact, Kamala would have never been the Democratic nominee in the first place if she'd been a man, if she'd been male, because Biden said he would only pick someone for his VP who was a woman. So she got that position in part through that kind of sex-based affirmative action. And then when she loses in the position she never would have got but for her gender, she's also a victim of sexism. Like, the math is not mathing. I'm sure there are some people in some corners of America who have unconscious bias towards a female political leader or wouldn't vote for a woman, but there's others who voted for her because she is a woman, and I don't think it's a large voting demographic or the reason she lost. And I can't believe this guy actually tried to argue that American voters must all be sexist because Trump ran 3 times and twice beat women and lost to a man once. All the races were pretty close. That's a pretty small sample size to be making that kind of an inference from. And there's a lot of other factors involved in all 3 of those elections that totally distort the picture and cloud our ability to draw any sort of conclusion from that simple fact. The pandemic, Hillary Clinton's unique baggage, the fact that Kamala Harris was handed the nomination and not actually picked for it, never ran. Like, there are so many different factors that could explain that discrepancy beyond just sexism. And again, it's such a small data set that you can't use it to prove a point that big. Now, there was another absurd and kind of farcical moment on this panel when Ernest, the woke guy on the panel, tried to accuse Republicans of using misinformation and then immediately himself spread misinformation. Take a listen.
A lot of these issues and the narratives of them and the misinformation about a lot of those issues, people are going to have to just F around and find out, to be honest.
What's the misinformation? What misinformation?
A lot of, I would
That's what
say
the Democrats did.
A lot of the promises, sure. Here's the thing. People's lives are going to be impacted regardless.
What misinformation, Ernest?
I'm going to get there. So the tariffs, right? About what he's going to do economically with tariffs. What is he going to do about immigration issues? His policies, the people he's going to put in his cabinet. Look, we can be here and we can
What's
go
the
for blows and
misinformation?
talk about who's better. Can I finish?
What's the misinformation?
Okay, tariffs, the economic plan that he has.
What about
There's
it?
some misinformation there. Project 2025, which he denied he was going to do. And now his people have said that was a part of the plan. So which one is it, right?
No, you see, Ernest, the trouble is, the disinformation, Ernest, is actually now coming from your mouth. That's the problem.
He literally said, so let me correct you again, Piers. He literally said that he was not affiliated with Project 2025. Now his biggest advisors are saying that that was a part of the plan, including Steve Bannon.
They're trolling.
So I love how Piers was asking this dude, all right, you've accused Republicans of spreading misinformation. What examples? And he kept not saying. And then when he was pressed on it, he said tariffs and immigration. Now, I disagree with some of Trump's views on tariffs. I think they're incorrect, but that's not really misinformation. It's more of a policy disagreement or a disagreement with how things work. And his views on immigration, I mean, to be fair, he's spread a couple stories about immigration that aren't true. And I guess you could call that misinformation, although it's kind of standard fare for politicians to use fake anecdotes to push their ideas. But basically, his ideas on immigration are policies. Misinformation is maybe around the edges about specific stories, but it's like the gist of it's real and true and just his opinion that people like and agree with. I just think it's funny because if you ask me to like pick a few examples of times Trump has spread like fake news or other things, I could think of much better examples than that, but he really floundered under the spotlight. And what makes it so hilarious is that Ernest went on to spew Democrat misinformation, which is claiming that Project 2025 is Trump's agenda. Project 2025 is this right-wing vision plan from the Heritage Foundation that has tons of kind of crazy ideas in there. I did a whole episode deep dive into it. You can go check it out if you want. Just search my name, Project 2025. And Trump has repeatedly crapped all over it, said he doesn't support it, and put out his own agenda that has very different policies on things like gay marriage and IVF than Project 2025 does. Of course, there's some overlap for sure, but it's not the same agenda, and he doesn't support it. So Democrats have really spread a ton of misinformation about that, and it's just hilarious to see Ernest double down on that in his rant about misinformation. Like, babe, maybe look in the mirror. Now, the one point he makes is that some conservatives, now that Trump has won, Matt Walsh did this, have come out and said, can we admit that Project 2025 was the real agenda? And as the guest noted, they are trolling. Trump still doesn't support a lot of what's in Project 2025. They are trolling you. And maybe some of those individuals do fully throatedly agree with, like Matt Walsh is pretty far to the right. He might agree with everything in Project 2025. But Trump himself does not, and the people who are saying now otherwise on the right are trolling you because they think your panic and hysteria is funny. And frankly, it is. That's why I wanted to show you guys this segment, because to me, it just kind of perfectly encapsulated and distilled everything that's wrong with woke media these days, and why Piers Morgan is one of the biggest people on YouTube, because he has a way of dealing with these people that is just so admirable. But what did you guys think? Let me know in the comments section below. And now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where we take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, this woke dude is here to lecture all us evil white men about our privilege.
I don't really care about politics. Pipe down, white man.
Oh, I love being spoken to like that and told to shut up because of my race and gender. How very tolerant and open-minded of you.
Okay? I don't want to hear it out of you. Because here's the thing. If you're a white guy, you probably don't have to pay attention to politics for yourself. Because you'll probably be fine. You're right. If you're a middle-class white dude, you'll be fine.
Actually, white dudes still have to pay insane high gas prices and unreasonable grocery prices, still lose their jobs and are concerned about the economy, still get sent to fight in wars that get started overseas, still have our tax dollars stolen from us and wasted, still have kids trapped in failing schools. This idea that government and politics doesn't affect white men is just not true. In the same way, there are lots of people of color who are checked out of politics and aren't super political and don't follow political news and don't think it will particularly affect them one way or the other. It's not a white dude thing. And it's giving such pick-me vibes. Like, look, I'm one of the good white men and I hate myself, so please don't hate me like all you woke people out there. I want to be your friend. Don't hate me like you hate all the white men. They're not going to pick you. They're still going to hate all white men, these crazy TikTok people. You're not going to be the exception. You're not going to be special. So you're just being racist and sexist while accomplishing nothing for yourself or others.
But do you not have any friends that don't fit that demographic? Because if you do have friends, which you should, that aren't white dudes, you should be worried about them and you should care about politics. And
I do, and a lot of them voted for frickin' Trump. But I'm sure this guy thinks they're just all sexist, self-hating white supremacists or something.
if you don't have friends who are not white dudes, that's weird, man. That's a weird thing to be in that situation where you're only friends with white men. That's kind of gross, actually. That makes me like gag.
I love this dude's dramatic pauses. And I agree, it's good to have diverse friend groups, but also it's normal for men to mostly be friends with other men. And depending on what part of the country you live in, it might be mostly white men around you. So like, I'm not convinced that just because a white man has friends that are mostly just white men must mean he's racist or sexist. I do think there's value in having friends that are from different places and perspectives. And I've learned a lot from some of my friends who aren't from America, for example. And I have lots of female friends, but he might be reading into it a little bit too much and not accepting that some parts of the country are still not all that diverse. So of course your friend group wouldn't be either.
So I just wonder where your empathy is. Because yeah, you're right. You can ride it out. You'll be fine. But do you care about do you care about like other people at all? Are you a psychopath? Freak?
So I love this idea that there are all these people who, because of their identity, just won't survive, won't be able to ride it out, like what happened to them all during 2016 to 2020. Huh? I'll wait. And I can't imagine thinking that politics was so simple as the people who care about other people all vote one way and the people who don't care about other people all vote another way. Actually, they might care about other people, but have different ideas about the best way to help them, or different ideas and understandings of what policies or what approach will actually lead to better outcomes for those people. I mean, I feel like this dude is engaging at just like kindergarten level of logic, but I don't think the audience is actually for white men who may have voted for Trump or who he says he's speaking to. I think it's actually just all virtue signaling for a third party that hates the people he's speaking to and likes the way he's talking down to them, because no white man who voted for Trump is going to hear somebody tell them to shut the F up because of their skin color and their sex and be like, yeah, I should listen to this guy. Maybe he's right. Like, if I were a Kamala stan and I was trying to fix the Democratic Party's problem of appealing to young men, this is literally the opposite of the way to do it. Like, play this in your seminars on what not to do. But they're probably just going to double down on this kind of crap. Honestly, what do you guys think of that interesting video? Let me know in the comments below. And do hit that like button while you're at it. Now, I'll wrap up today's show by reading a few of your comments from recent episodes. One person writes, okay, in Georgia, you can have an abortion up to 20 weeks, 22 weeks from your last menstrual cycle. As for wishing a woman has to stay home, well, let's give this chickadee a little lesson in what happened to me. I had a few bosses, all women, who gave me crap if I had to stay home with one of my sick children. My husband would when he could, but if he had court, I stayed home. Finally, we had enough of the crap, and I decided to stay home and be a homemaker. Hubby made more money and I made that call. I was a social worker, and I can't say this enough, my female bosses were the ones who gave me a hard time. Well, I'm sorry that happened to you, and power to you. If being a stay-at-home mom is what makes you happy, I'm happy for you. And I'm actually not that surprised that female bosses were tougher on you and weren't super supportive. I've heard that from a lot of my female friends. This comment continues, I agree with you on immigration. Get rid of the criminals and keep the rest. My son is married to a woman from Mexico. She's legal, and he has many friends from Mexico. They're a part of our family, and they're part of the cogs that is in the US. I'm hoping once Trump sees these numbers, he'll understand why it's important to keep these folks here. Yeah, that's what I think. Get rid of criminals, get rid of welfare frauds and cheats, but hardworking people who are here without papers, most of them should be allowed to stay, is honestly what I believe. Another person writes, John Oliver and his ilk responding on the trans issues reminds me of a great quote from the movie The American President. I've been operating under the assumption that the reason Bob devotes so much time and energy to shouting at the rain was that he simply didn't get it. Well, I was wrong. Bob's problem isn't that he doesn't get it. Bob's problem is that he can't sell it. And yes, I get the irony that in the movie it's a good Democrat talking to the evil Republican politician about a culture war issue. That's interesting. Maybe I'll have to check that movie out. Another person says it is a national emergency, referring to immigration. Hell, Biden declared a national emergency over Israeli settlers in Judea and Samaria building houses on contested land. Well, that sure sounds like an abuse of emergency powers, the kind of thing I wouldn't support. The comment continues, emergency powers provide broad authority and every president does it. When he says military, he means National Guard. National Guard already does this work. I am not sure we know that, but okay. You are also wrong about the number of illegal aliens. Dead wrong. The number you cited is the number who came in the last 4 years. No, it isn't. If you go to the report, they actually break it down. And 11 million of the 13 million, they estimate, are people who were here before 2022. And then several million more have come in since 2022. The numbers could be bigger, but that would actually mean it would be more expensive and more economically harmful to deport them all. So the comment continues. Also, Biden has deported 4.4 million already his term. Why didn't that cost 88 billion? It's all lies. Well, I don't know how many Biden has deported, but if that number's true, I'm sure it did cost a whole lot. I don't know why you're assuming it didn't. Another person comments, that girl in a car, referring to the TikTok we reacted to yesterday. There is a Russian expression roughly translated as, I made it up so I can get upset at it. Dude, that's perfect, and it honestly applies to so many of these TikTok videos we react to. Another person comments, what has happened to the people of America? Instead of banding together, everyone wants to tear this country apart at the seams. Why is there so much hate and people so evil that they want to openly wish death and despair on their neighbor? We need to pull together before we defeat ourselves. I completely agree, and I'm really sad at the toxicity I see on the rise, and unfortunately, I worry it's only going to get worse over the next couple of years. Another person says, Rowling is our queen. Yeah, I've always really liked J.K. Rowling. I don't agree with every single one of her takes, but she did a series of interviews on this Free Press podcast called The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling, and I thought it was phenomenal and a really interesting insight into a very fascinating woman. Another person commented, Brad, remember that video with the bonkers gal saying the men needed to die like yesterday? And even one of the commenters said, it needs to happen today. Well, check out the story of Corey Burke. This insane dingbat just stabbed her father to death over this exact thing. It goes deep. Please look into it. She's bonked. Wow. Well, that's horrible. And of course, I think it's really disturbing that anyone would engage in violence against anyone over politics, let alone a family member. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet, and do hit that like button before you go. And remember to comment with your thoughts. I do take the time to read the comments, and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.